Good morning, Judith.
Hey, good morning, Sonya.
Welcome to the Coach's Cup podcast. I'm Sonya Green from sonyagreencoaching.com.
And I am Coach Judith Fender with the No BS Weight Loss Program.
The amazing Coach Judith Fender.
Amazing. That's right.
This morning, we are here to talk about your stress.
My stress?
Well, yes. Not your stress.
That is what started
Our
this.
Stress. Yes, it is what started it. Yeah. But I want to put in a quick disclaimer. We are going to talk about stress. I'm sure the word anxiety will come up, but I do want to say that we recognize there is a difference between the medical term anxiety, which requires a medical intervention, often medication to help a person with that. And we are not here to diagnose or offer treatment. We are not medical professionals. So
we just play one on the podcast.
That's right. That's right. So we're talking about stress and lower level anxiety, not the medical condition. So just want to make that real clear.
Yeah, the emotion of anxiety.
Yes. So you want to tell us about why we're talking about your stress today, our stress?
Well, if you've been following along, you might understand. If this is your first podcast with us, you might need to go back and catch up on a few. Life happens. Did you know that? Life has been happening for me. It feels like a lot this year. And arguably, I don't think anyone would disagree. This year has been full of life and unexpected things with people I love, and one after another. And I reached a point where I'm like, I need some time off. I got stress. I can't think. Literally felt paralyzed in my brain. And so having a week off, I went down the path of, for the purposes of this podcast, down the path of the physiological connection of stress. Yeah. Because that, for me, when I am experiencing life, I feel at the effect of my body. I'm aware of my thinking, but it's not like I'm really thinking shitty things. Life is happening.
Yeah.
And when it reaches a point that I felt my, what do we call your good thing? No, your top down thinking, my, shoot, I know the word now. My cognitive abilities were impaired. Yeah, I was blocked. I could not make. I literally felt paralyzed in my thinking process and ability to accomplish things. That I could just stare at the screen, felt immobile, and that in and of itself compiled on the stress because it didn't match the situation I was in. I'm sitting in a chair.
Why are you? Yeah. Well, let's back up just a little bit and talk about the difference, because anybody who's listened to us before, they know that you actually do deal with anxiety at the medical intervention level. But talk about how that anxiety is different than the stress.
Okay. So for me, anxiety is probably preferable to stress because anxiety feels focused. It feels manageable. It feels very linear and like I can get shit done. Stress feels
so your anxiety, I'm sorry, but your anxiety is almost pushing you forward.
Oh yeah, it feels productive. Okay. It feels, even though I may not be productive, the feeling doesn't feel like stress. Stress feels like stuck in the ocean, barely, just with my nose like 1 millimeter from underwater.
Yeah.
Paralyzed with.
Right. I think a lot of people, when they talk about overwhelm, that is a code word for stress.
I even said that word to one of my coaches. I was like, oh, I think I feel overwhelmed, and I think a lot of I have a new respect for the word overwhelm.
Yeah.
It feels like paralysis.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I have to, I guess I'm going to confess today, but I have been putting off something this summer that needed to get done in my, professor job, my other life. And I was putting it off, and I was allowing myself to be stressed and overwhelmed about it because I said to myself, I didn't know how to do it. It was something that I had to figure out. It was something I hadn't done before. And I said to myself, well, I'm going to have to ask somebody. I'm going to figure out how to do it. And so I was letting that block me for a while. Then I asked someone, which was no big deal. And not only like it didn't even require a meeting with her. She gave me instructions that had been created for this task. But I still sat with it for 2 more weeks, stressing about it and being, in that paralysis. And finally, Saturday morning, I sat down and knocked it out in about an hour. And it's curious to me how we can do that to ourselves. That is stress. That is overwhelm, but it is totally self-created, self-imposed.
But here's the thing. I'm curious where you were functioning at other levels while in this overwhelm. For me, my functionality it felt like executive function. That's the word I was looking for. My executive function was not working. It was very compromised. Intellectually, like to do, quote, hard things, to read, to process, answer questions, things like that. But now I want to comment like verbally, I think, because we talked about that humming thing that the monks do because it connects the both right and the left hemisphere of the brain. I noticed I could speak very clearly about my problems, but I couldn't solve when I would read.
Well, and that's probably the level of the stress that we were feeling. So, I mean, this was one task, and that's why I could function on other levels because I have other places I can go to, although it still kind of hangs out in the back of my brain. It never, there's always that little niggling, annoying feeling in the back of my brain that this needs to be done and I'm not doing it. Yeah.
I'm still here.
Exactly.
You're going to deal with me one day.
Where yours had built, it was a bigger issue to you. It was like, I've got all of these bricks that have been stacked up on each other and they've all added up to this where I am.
I literally said, like, that's it. Like there's no more room at the end. Yeah. Like I have nothing. I had my last straw.
Yeah. So I think, well, and, to all of the life coaches out there, they're saying, well, it's your thoughts for both of you, silly. It's your thoughts. And that's true. My thought was, I don't want to learn how to do this. I don't want to, I can dig deeper, but that was where I was on the thought level. So we know that it's our thoughts, but we want to dig into why we let our thoughts go there and we get stressed today. So that's some of the things that we're going to discuss in our time together today. Is why we let why our brains go there and then what we can do about it. Well, so go ahead.
I was going to say all species experience stress.
Yes.
There's that. We're hardwired for this shit.
Even flies.
Even flies to humans are hardwired for stress.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a safety mechanism.
Yes, talk about that. They're actually, when we talk about stress, we want to differentiate today because there is good stress. If you're out there and you're going, whoa, hold on, you just lost me. There is good stress. There's stress that motivates. When I was in college, I noticed that I was a much better student when in the semesters that I took 18 hours and worked 2 jobs. That's when I was the best student, because I was constantly being pushed to get things done, to organize my time, to move forward efficiently. And I was a much better student than if I just took 15 hours and just worked 1 job and I had this extra time, because I was better in the mode moving forward all the time. It motivated me. Yes, it kept me in the flow rather than dipping in and out. And that was me. That's my hardwiring. I recognize that. But I think I recognized that early, and that was important. That was good stress for me because it kept me motivated.
Which makes, I'm thinking of procrastination. I don't know. This is where we want to drop the bomb about procrastination. So in my research, it came up with that it's when we procrastinate, it actually secretes a hormone. It's a neurotropic, right? That it hits a specific nerve that hits that stress mode for fear of failure, and that it can be a motivator, right? Hence, if we don't act on that chemical, right, that's telling us you're going to fail if you don't get this done, and how when we're in the procrastination mode, how if we don't do, then that it keeps going, how we are setting ourselves up for that cascade effect of not accomplishing and thus failing. But that also is that release when we think that there is a little bit of a motivating factor from procrastinating, doing your work last minute, because you're getting that chemical cocktail. Yeah.
It's not enough that I would encourage it.
No, and the key to all of this, right? With good stress, the key is learning to manage it, when to turn it off.
Right.
If you can't manage your stress and turn it off with your thinking, with your breathing, that was a big component of what I came up with, having some real-time tools, because life happens, emotions happen in the moment, and regulating is going to be key.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to a session that I sat in. I think you did too, several weeks ago, maybe a month ago, with Simone Soul. And she was talking about that our T line, our thoughts, even though we all have these thoughts, they come from internal factors. They come from our nervous system wiring, our genetics, our familial or social conditioning. And we need to respect the biological reasons that the thoughts that we have come to us. So in any given situation, you and I and all of our listeners are going to have different reactions, because we are all from different places. We have different experiences. We have different genetics.
Okay, I'm curious if we want the word reaction, or is it perception of an event? Because based on our cultural, biological, familial experiences, we would perceive, we were talking about threat versus challenge.
Yeah.
And how we perceive a
That's
situation.
true. Yeah.
The stress response is going to come.
The stress response. Yes, that's true. That's true. The stress response will be there, but it's because of our perception, and our perception is based on. Yes. Okay. So lesson number 1, I think, to take from this is that we don't judge our thoughts.
But wait a minute, you don't believe them? Don't get hooked into them?
Don't believe them, don't get hooked into them, and don't judge them, because our thoughts are going to come based on our experiences. That's where these perceptions happen. They're based on, all of these things that we're made from, and we need to respect that. But that said, we still, it still doesn't mean that we just let them wash over us and we don't try to manage them.
Agreed.
That's where the magic is. And I think you were talking about, we were talking about the good stress. I think the difference between that, like you said, it's knowing how to manage it and not allowing it to become chronic.
Right. So like the good stress in my research was, things that are going to push and activate us to get going. And specifically, the good stress was things that like would get the adrenaline moving, and it would be good because it like
zip lining.
Wait a minute. I think that might come in the medium term. I don't know.
Okay.
But things like, ice, jumping in an ice water bath, even if people who take those cold showers in the morning, right? You're getting that short-term response, and it activates acetylcholine to adrenaline, and that it's good in that it helps combat bacteria in the body, right? So I think about, like, I have a Norwegian friend, and like they're really big into getting into that cold water, and then they have the hot the sauna is like right there next to the cold water. And I'm not a fan so much of the cold water, but that kind of short-term stress is good, that it activates that response.
Some of the examples that I was looking at were like a first date, or starting a new job, or even, for some people, a roller coaster. I don't think a roller coaster is positive stress for me. I think it's negative stress. But those things, that's that anticipation.
Yeah.
Or that's what motivates us. And so it's not a long-term chronic issue.
Yeah. And you're right. The zip lining would fall in the short term, the activating of and I had said to Sonya when we were pre-gaming about, like, I was not nervous. Typically, I have been nervous in the past to like zip or hot air balloon or do exciting things. But I think it matched what the vibration my body was presenting with. My thoughts and my body had been, it didn't match. So anyway, in that moment,
let's talk about that for a minute.
I felt regulated.
Okay. So I want to really break that down, because I think that's important for people to understand. So when you were leading up to your vacation, the stress that you had been feeling, this paralyzing stress, did not match talk about that, how your mind and body didn't match.
So several things with my physical therapist had requested that I not do my HIIT exercises. So I want to be sure that this is part of the mix for me as I'm peeling this onion back. Because part of learning to regulate our emotional system is learning to create that tolerance, right? Like creating that when you're working out, it's fun, and you can work harder and you can get to that limit. But in my mind, I would always be like, this is exciting, this is good. And I was calm because it like blanketed me with the good endorphins that felt good. And I haven't had my endorphins in a very long time. And I think that also, a part of my perfect storm and my paralysis was not having good exercise. So my body needed like collecting maybe the carbon dioxide in my breathing, sitting down and just doing shallow breathing all day and never really getting my release for myself.
Right.
Okay. Now, what was the question?
Talking about how your experience was not matching your body. And so what you're saying is you had all of that to burn off.
Yes.
And, I think I think about the levels of anxiety that my students present with today and how different that is from 25 years ago. And, I have to wonder if a lot of stress and anxiety that we have today hasn't been increased as we've become more sedentary.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I mean, okay, so I have been doing HIIT workouts for like 5 years. So
And what's a HIIT workout for those who don't know?
High intensity interval training, right? It's max heart rate for basically 55 minutes is what was the capacity I was at, slamming weights, moving, like there may be 2-minute break in between sets. So
high intensity.
Right. Because it helps you reach that threshold of burning off that oxygen. So, which I want to talk about, Andrew Huberman talks about this breathing, right? We've mentioned this in the short term when we're experiencing short-term stress. If we wanted to help regulate our body, right? That's what this is about, learning to regulate our emotion. And so he talks about the a breathing technique, and I want to make sure it's called the Wim Hoffman, the TUMO, or the super oxygenated breathing. And it's called the physiological sigh. Okay. So we do it naturally when we're sitting down and we take that big sigh, or he talks about how it's a double inhale and a long exhale. It's a peak twice up and down, and how it triggers nerves in your face. So if like you're giving public speaking, and that's kind of what it's triggered for, that your face will calm down. It's naturally soothing because you're getting that oxygen through your body, and it helps get your heart to match the conditions that you are experiencing.
And so you were not experiencing, because you weren't burning it off.
Nope.
That was just building.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I there's a couple of videos of me screaming on my zip line. And I thought to myself, maybe I was getting my oxygen in right there, just screaming. Felt good. It was exhilarating. It was just what I needed.
So in that moment, it matched what your body had been feeling. Was it a release for what your body had been feeling, or?
I think clearly it was exactly what I needed. Like that.
And you're a self-confessed adrenaline junkie, I should say.
I'm having all kinds of questions about myself now when I think, I'm like, wait a minute, why have I been doing all these things? Is it to just get relief? What? I think about my son, and he loves to do, like, as many boys do, or girls too, those high risk activities, right? What we're seeking in my son, I don't think he would mind, generalized anxiety and how it runs in families. There's a genetic, my mother had it. And have we talked about the amygdala? I don't know if this is a place to bring it up.
We haven't, but this is probably a good place to bring that up, because that could explain some of this.
I had so I'm 53, and I was my parents. So it had probably been in my very early 30s. I was in counseling, experiencing a lot of anxiety, and like not sleeping, diarrhea. This had been going on for months. It was not like the emotion of anxiety that I was living
the
in
physical.
Yes. And she told me, and this was actually probably before even Google, that there was research that children who grew up in stressful situations had an enlarged amygdala, which resulted in this response, this loop that we have in our body when the brain perceives a stress, whatever it is, based on my perception of a stress, that the response is it's instant. It's instant. And it can be one thought is all it can take to get
it started
going. Yes. Yeah. And then it's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
So learning to regulate and disassociate, and not in the psychological way, but learning to let my body be
to literally disassociate.
Right. To live I consider it letting it live a separate life when I'm in anxiety. I let it live separately from me and my thinking, because it sounds right. It feels right when it sounds weird to say, maybe.
Yeah. No, I think you've said it before. You don't resist it. Anxiety is going to come along for the ride. It's not going to drive the bus, but it's going to come along. It's going to sit beside you. And I think that's a good way to talk about disassociating. It's there, but it's not in you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, because I have awareness of it, which is interesting in this, in my research with Andrew Huberman, he says, one way when we're in medium term stress, which I think we're kind of there, like the kind that lasts several days to weeks, that I think is like, so anxiety feels very hyper focused to me. But when I'm in stress, I feel, everything is just too much. So he talks about, he calls it the dilate gaze, to take a broad vision, to like literally try to see your body in its environment, in the environment that you're in, and to stare, like to take that broad gaze back, and that helps raise the stress threshold and to bring the body to a comfortableness in the stress.
So again, it's about perception, because when you're in the middle of it feels like everything's kind of closing in on you. And he's saying, let's take a step back and get the wide view.
It's kind of that zoom out.
Right. And we do that in coaching all the time. A client will say, I'm just overwhelmed. I can't take one more thing. And I'll ask that. Usually I'll ask her, so tell me, what are these things? And when they start listing them, it's just like maybe 2 or 3 things. It's not, it's not crowding you in and smothering you, but it seems that way. The perception is that it's that way. So if you step back and actually list them, then you can go, oh, that's not what I thought it was. It just felt that way.
Right. And so again, the key thing, like a lot of the thinking, this is engaging your physical senses to look with broad vision and a dilation effect. He said you can blink. It's okay to blink when you do this, but to kind of like zoom out. And I think of that as like literally thinking of out of body, like kind of getting out of body and getting out of thought and seeing yourself as being present.
Right. Yeah. So much of this comes back to things that we teach all the time. And I want to take just a minute, because sometimes we look at this as, well, never mind. I'm going to delete that part, because I don't know where I was going with that.
Oh, I'm like, whoa. I'm looking at my notes.
So medium, that's medium stress.
All
right. So now let's talk about the chronic stress.
Oh, one last thing. Can I throw this in?
Absolutely.
Learning when we're in medium stress. And I love this so much. What he says is he calls it learning to dance with stress. And that's like, make it your buddy, right? Like there is that, it's a relationship. It's an active give and take with your thinking, and including the body, and using the tools of breathing and the dilation gaze to dance.
Yeah. We're not resisting it. In other words, what we do on a regular basis, or what I see in my clients, what I've seen in myself as I self-coach, is we are trying to resist that feeling. And so we push against it, which takes all our energy. It takes all of our emotional energy, trying to resist that, and instead accept it in, like you talk about.
Right. And what I love about him so much, because he is so scientific right? It's very sciencey for him. And he's like, I hear all this mindfulness stuff and this woo about like dropping in your body. And he's like, I don't know, I'm in my body. I never left my body. And he actually said there's actually people who have a diagnosis where they want their arms amputated. They can't feel them, arms and legs. Like there's this, it's a medical, it's some kind of nerve. I don't know what that was interesting. Anywho, but like literally, like remember that your body is a vessel. To include it in this process. Do not discount it or try to resist the vibrations.
Yeah. Yeah. We move with them.
Dance with it.
Yeah. I like that. All right. So now chronic stress, and that's the stress that's harmful to our health. And that's the stress. I think people allow themselves to get in the habit of stress almost, because it's that if it's chronic, it's constant and it's triggering cortisol. It's doing all the things we don't want it to do. So talk about that for a minute.
Right. So in the chronic things, like on the body level, it's hypertension, right? It's stress on the heart, coronary heart disease. And when you're in chronic stress, you're probably not, where it gets to be hazy, you're not doing the exercise, the diet, and the sleep. Chronic stress interferes with sleep.
Yes.
And so it's just a perfect storm, if you will, of a physical condition where your body is just in survival mode, really.
And what a perfect example that we cannot take body and mind apart. I mean, if we try to live in a way that works against our bodies are going to rebel. They're not going to, we're allowing stress to attack our bodies at this point, rather than working with it, rather than dropping into them.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like, do you know anyone that's in chronic stress?
I think there are a lot of people in chronic stress.
I think I might know one or two.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just given me a new sense of, it's just a term I've heard my whole life, and I even studied it in college, but there's just a newfound respect for the body and the brain and the effects of chronic stress. But this person I'm thinking of sleeps really well. So I'm going to think, maybe he's doing all right.
Yeah. I don't know. But the thing to ask yourself, and chronic stress, if you want to look at examples, people who are in, maybe it's you have a bad home life, an unhappy home life. Maybe you have a job that keeps you in chronic stress. It could be something else, but typically those are the two big ones.
Yeah, or a combination.
Yeah, or a combination. That's right, because sometimes they run together. But asking yourself why am I allowing myself to live in this situation? Again, not judging it, not at this point trying to change it, but just being curious. Why am I allowing myself to live in chronic stress? Because it is affecting your health negatively. Go ahead. You were getting ready to say something.
I was just thinking, like, could we even imply? I don't even know. So please take this with a grain of salt. Dear listeners, as Sonya says, like, how much choice is there, right? In long-term stress, like, for a person who's living this, who's not exercising, who's not eating well, who's not sleeping well, who has outside stress coming at them and physically living in a body that is in stress.
And I think that's the key. We tell ourselves when we're in those stressful situations that there's no choice. But what you're pointing out is that there's a lot of choice. There's a choice in what you do with your body. If you choose to exercise, what you do with your sleep patterns. I mean, there are choices about all of those things.
All of it. All of it.
And you get to, I mean, we're not saying go and just throw all of your current habits, out the window at once, because that's not a change that your body, that you'll sustain. Mm-hmm. But you can start making small changes. Mm-hmm. You do have a choice. What?
I have a great one here. One small change is about best mechanisms for long-term stress. We said sleep, exercise. It's social connection mitigates long-term stress.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that, because when we were pre-gaming, we were talking about isolation and how crazy the world kind of seems right now. Like in Nashville, I know we are having a road rage shooting almost daily.
What?
Yes. There was 2 weeks ago, there was every single day that week, there was a road rage shooting. And you hear about them all the time. And it makes me wonder if the isolation that we've been under with the pandemic has not created some of this almost insanity, it seems like.
Well, I've got a chemical cocktail here for you of there's a word, Tachycanum. I think I'm saying that right. That when we are socially isolated, this is a hormone that is secreted, and it Andrew called it a sinister molecule, and it's when we are not connected enough that is secreted, and it creates agitation, and it kind of spins around on itself. It's not a helpful hormone. But go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and it comes from the stress of being isolated.
Right. And it doesn't help, because when you get to this point, you want, you don't want to get to this point.
No.
You don't want to be doing right.
No. Yeah. I mean, it's terrifying. But I think, and that's just one example. I mean, there's other things that I think we've all seen. Well, there's been an increase in mass shootings. I mean, not just road rage, but across the country, there's been an increase in mass shootings. And you have to wonder if that is associated with the stress of the pandemic and the isolation that we've been under for the last year and a half. It just seems too easy to be coincidental at this point.
Interesting. And I don't watch the news anymore. So there's why.
Yeah.
But so he goes on to talk about creating social connection for yourself, and how it helps mitigate long-term stress, because it secretes serotonin and not oxytocin, the lactating hormone that is secreted between mother and it's highly engaged for mother and child, and father and child, but more so for the mother due to the lactating component, and that it was post sex, ladies.
Yeah. Orgasm.
Right. There you go. That this is secreted, and it's a good thing. We want that. But that serotonin comes from connection. When we are meeting with people we enjoy talking, discussing, that connection takes investment.
Yeah.
Create a sense of, here he uses it, of delight in something you enjoy, seeking joy and delight. You don't hear that word very often, delight.
That changes your thoughts, right? When you are in chronic stress, the people that I think about who I've known who are in chronic stress, they're always in disaster mode. The thoughts are always negative. There's always a threat. And if you can create a sense of delight, joy, changing that threat to a thought of challenge, then it's hard to stay in that negativity, right? You're shifting out of that toward a more positive, and so the stress is alleviated.
Right. So like my mind went to thinking about our person who's in chronic stress, who comes home to a stressful home. That would be, I mean, of course I'm thinking of a dude, right? A dude coming home from work, but bear with me, that, harping on the husband and, immediately telling your tales to him and not letting him have space to come home and rest and delight. Or
Decompress.
even those of us who are working from home.
Yeah.
Right. There's no break.
Yeah.
We're here.
Right. That's that commute from the office to the kitchen isn't far enough.
It's not far enough. No,
Yeah.
because there's laundry and dog and
Yeah, on the path. So finding a way to create connection can break that chronic stress, because ultimately it's changing your thought. It's pulling you out of that constant disaster, negativity, threat mode into a more positive, hope filled scenario where there's goodness, there's delight. That is a great word.
It is. Yeah. Just even saying the word delight feels delightful.
It does. It feels, that's what I was thinking. It feels delightful. So as we're wrapping up, I guess, the thing that I want to leave our listeners with, we have pointed out a lot of reasons for stress. I don't want you to ever see those as excuses. That's one thing we talk about in coaching a lot. Is it useful for me to know that my amygdala is larger because of the stress I endured as a child? I would argue that it's important to know that.
I find it very helpful. I don't use it as a fallback, but
right.
When sometimes when I feel at the effect of my body, I like knowing some physiology, some biology behind this. It helps me make sense when I'm not, when things don't match.
Yeah. It helps you make sense. I think that's the perfect way to say it. It's not an excuse. Oh, well, my amygdala was enlarged as a child, so I'm just
it's giant. It's the biggest amygdala ever.
Yeah. These are the cards I was dealt, and so there you go.
I'm going to donate it to science.
Yeah. Well, now that might actually be useful, but
put it on my tombstone.
we do want to point out that this is not, none of this is to give you an excuse. You are still the person in control of your life. You get to decide, am I going to stay in chronic stress? Am I going to start figuring out a way to move away from that and find more delight and joy? Because you do have control. I love that, stepping back and looking at the big picture.
The dilation.
Yes. Yes. And so I want to make sure that's the takeaway I want our listeners to have, is you get to decide your stress level every single day.
Yeah. I'm going to go with the fact that you got stress. Learn to use some tools to regulate your body for in those moments when life is, learning to dance, exactly what Sonya's saying, right? Learning to dance with life, and our capacity to tolerate, if you will, is dependent upon it, and that we all have it upon us, whether it's with the breathing, whether it's with the cold showers, whether it's with the dilation gaze effect, to find some tools that work for you. And of course, managing your mind. There's that. I may have heard that once or twice in the past couple of weeks.
We have, we have one life. Why would we choose the path of negativity and isolation and chronic stress? All right. If you would like a coach to help you through this, then you can find me at sonyagreencoaching.com. I am happy to talk with you about the ways we can work together to help you manage your mind. and your stress.
And I'm Coach Judith, and you can find me at the No BS Weight Loss Program. And I would love to coach you on whatever you got going on. Is stress? Can you want to lose weight and you have a stressful life?
Yes, that's right. Get that cortisol trigger taken care of. All right. We would also love for you to leave us a 5-star review.
Yes.
That helps other people to find us. It helps grow our listeners, and it helps them figure out how to live their best lives.
Right. How to zoom in and zoom out and dance with their lives.
Yeah. So if you have a friend who you think could use this podcast, hit that share button, send it to them, and let's get them listening too. We'll have the whole world dancing with stress.
Right. Wearing a red dress.
Exactly. Doing a cha-cha.
You look very lovely in red today, by the way.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. All right. We'll see you all next week.
Bye.